In the wake of the Civil War and with rising conflicts in the West, the U.S. military would form new fighting units of African Americans that would take their name from the monarch of the plains, the Buffalo Soldiers.
Civil War was over. So in 1866, Congress enacted to put it 2 units of cavalry and also 2 of infantry of the black soldiers. This was good for them too, because again, they couldn't find a job in the South. They had never been paid. And here with the military, they could join it. The Buffalo Soldiers, being called Buffalo Soldiers were very proud of that name. Because it represented a lot of suffering and strife and heroism.
My name's Oscar Clark. I'm the son of our group's leader, John J. Clark. Been around this all my life. My dad, as well as my uncles, used to be with the Nicodemus Buffalo Soldiers. So ever since I can remember, my family's been doing Buffalo Soldier reenactments, living historian type stuff, being in parades. Very fond memories of the Nicodemus parade, homecoming parade every year. Seeing my family up there, it's a big celebration of Nicodemus' history, but seeing specifically my family, the people I know, going up and reliving this and showing off the maneuvers and showing off the history of the Buffalo Soldiers is something that is very near and dear to me and my immediate siblings.
1866, Congress passed a law that said black men could serve in the military. So they had a choice. They could join the infantry. They had the 39th, 38th, 39th, 40th, 41st Infantry. Or they could join the cavalry. They had the 9th and the 10th. The 9th Cavalry is in Greensville, Louisiana. The 10th Cavalry is in Leavenworth, Kansas. Being a Kansas native, where do you think I went? Leavenworth. Went to Leavenworth. So see, they didn't have any trouble getting black men to join because they said that they were going to pay us $16 a month. Where else was I going to go to get $16 a month? Name is Jay Clark. I got started with the Nicodemus Buffalo Soldiers. My brother Curtis Clark told me to come over. I started hanging out. He's like, why don't you start riding with us? So I did. Went to Abilene was the first event I went to. They told the history and talked as people came by all the time. I fell in love with that, so that's why I still do it. I like to share it from a character perspective, as if I'm there. I'm there in the moment. So that's how I do it. I don't just talk, this was what it was. I try to do it as I'm in person, which brings a little bit more reality, fun into it. And I can say things that if I was just trying to just be documentary, I couldn't say, while still keeping it accurate. So I said, I'm going to go join the cavalry. So when I got there, they said, how old are you, boy? I said, well, I'm 16. They said, show me some proof. I looked at them and I said, what you want? Give me your birth certificate. What?
Yeah, you carry it?
You had one? What's a birth certificate? They looked at me and said, well, how old you? How do you know how old you are then? I looked at them and said, my mammy and my pappy say I'm 16, so I'm 16. All I had to do was look like I was 16. So I enlisted for 5 years. So they could join the infantry or the cavalry. It actually started out the 38th, 39th, 40th, 41st Infantry, which was later changed to the 24th and 25th Infantry. And then the 9th and the 10th Cavalry was started. One was in Greensville, Louisiana, the other in Fort Leavenworth, Kansas. They became the #1 cavalry unit of all time by earning 24 Medals of Congressional Honor. Now, I said they didn't have any trouble getting black men to join, didn't I? The trouble they had was getting people to command the black soldiers. So those white soldiers who could qualify, they would actually take a lesser ranking in the white units because they didn't want to be ridiculed They didn't want to be ostracized. They didn't want to take the backlash. But those who did go against the grain, like Captain Nicodemus Nolan, never wanted to go back and command a white unit ever again. They had less desertion. They had less alcoholism. And they didn't have to worry about where we were going to fight. So as Nicodemus Nolan was there, he was going around, he was teaching us our maneuvers on our horses, because we do everything by command, just like the infantry does on feet. And as we moved westward, we ran into the Plains Indians. Now the Plains Indians were very spiritual people like the black man. They said God had sent them the buffalo to be their brother and care for them. What was the buffalo to the Plains Indians?
The livelihood.
Everything. And as we started moving westward, they seen that something was very peculiar about the black soldier. The hair on the black man's head looked very much like that, the hair of the hump of the buffalo. Our skin looked very much like that of the fur of the buffalo. As they got into combat with us, they said our fighting spirit was very much like that of a wounded buffalo. We would not die. They started calling us buffalo soldiers.
Oh.
So for the very first time in history, the black man was called something out of respect and out of pride. We took that name, we wore it very proudly, because we fought in every war this country's ever had. The Buffalo Soldiers didn't come to an end until 1942 for the cavalry. In 1951 for all the Buffalo Soldiers when they integrated the military into one unit. That's just a little history of the Buffalo Soldiers. And my dad, Leland Clark, he was in the infantry. I got a great uncle, Sam Garland. He was in the 10th Cavalry.
Sam Garland was my great uncle. His wife Mary, her sister Margaret was my great grandmother. So Sam Garland is obviously was in the 10th U.S. Cavalry and was stationed there at Leavenworth, and that's where he mustered out. And he was introduced to Mary, and that's how they got married. They ultimately ended up in Nicodemus. So Sam, as a young boy, was born in Panzola County, Mississippi. His mother was Native American, and his father was black. And he worked on the riverboat as a cabin boy. And then, so he got a chance to really go up and down the Mississippi and see a little bit of the world during the antebellum years. And then he became a soldier, and he fought in the Civil War.
A lot of them had been veterans of the Civil War, because there were African-American units in the Civil War that won a lot of battles or helped in winning a lot of battles.
And so as time went on, and I continued to find out bits and pieces of information about Sam, and in Lula Craig's document, he talks about the Battle of Beecher Island.
One of the first episodes they had in Kansas was rescuing the people at Beecher's Island, which was just over in northeastern Colorado, not too many miles from the western state line of Kansas.
So it's
It's
an
a
island?
Beecher Island, yeah. It was where a battle actually took place by the river right there.
Yeah, with the Buffalo Soldiers.
Well, some other soldiers were there, and the Indians had captured them. And they were fighting, and the Indians attacked them, and it was the first time they've ever had the repeater. Instead of keep just sending waves and keep getting shot down, they said, we'll just starve them out.
The Cheyenne had laid siege on them.
So they just kept them from getting to the water because they didn't have any supplies, because they ran off all their horses and all their supplies. So they were just going to starve them out. Well, they tried to send 2 guys out. They got captured. So they seen they were dead. So they sent 2 more out.
These 2 scouts made their way off the island and were walking back to Fort Wallace. You know how far that is? It's a distance. But anyway, Sam and another Buffalo soldier ran into them, and they took them back to Fort Wallace. And that's when they garnered the troops, and they ended up going up and helping them.
And so it's the Buffalo Soldiers of the cavalry that came up and rescued him first.
I just find his story to be so incredible. It's just like, wow. Here's this young man, part Native American himself, joins the 10th U.S. Cavalry moves to the west and is in this area. And he ultimately moves to the area when he gets out of the military and comes and settles in Nicodemus on the Solomon River. It's amazing. They had it, I think the Buffalo Soldiers had it rough, but it was great for them. It gave them a sense of pride. I think it gave them, 3 square meals a day, even though it may have been hardtack and salt pork at times. But, just to have that military status and be a part, and then to get paid.
They were going to get $16 a month. There was no place else they could get $16 a month, if they could even get employment, period. So the military was a great place for blacks to go to take care of their families. Many of them would go and they'd send the money back home to their families to help purchase farms and land and stuff so they could make a life when they got out. Many of them, even though they enlisted for 5 years, re-enlisted because they still had nowhere to go.
It just gave them a little bit more sense of pride and, coming into their own as American citizens coming out of slavery. I know they were assigned to Fort Hays, and they were also down at Fort Larned.
Fort Wallace, Fort Riley, just about every fort there were. If they didn't serve there, they probably built the place, because they built many of the forts as well. The military had them doing all these things, but they were still instrumental in wanting to fight in these different battles. And when they did, they proved themselves very worthy.
And then there's a quote from Major Albert P. Morrill, 1870. "I cannot speak too highly of the conduct of the officers and men under my command, always cheerful and ready, braving the severest hardships with short rations and no water without a murmur. The Negro troops are particularly adapted to hunting Indians, knowing no fear and capable of great endurance." I think these men took pride in what they did. I know they did.
In fact, we actually captured Geronimo. The 7th Cavalry was saying Geronimo was so smart, he's always one step ahead of us. You know anything about the military, they like everything nice and shiny, right? Mm-hmm. What do you think happens when that hits the sun? So basically, Geronimo could sit there and look and see and count the number of stars he could see. And depending on how bright they were, he could tell approximately how far away they were. Yeah, well, that's a good thing about it. We actually burnt ours. How much reflection is that one going to do? None. And that's how we captured Geronimo. I didn't know that. And that's how he was always one step ahead of them, because he could count the reflection.
There were various battles in western Kansas with the 10th Cavalry, but one of them was the Battle of the Saline in the late 1860s.
My understanding of the Battle of the Saline really got started as a result of some railroad workers right there where Victoria is. They evidently got attacked by the Cheyenne. Several guys got killed, and word got back to the fort. They literally go back to the northeast, and they follow Big Creek to a certain point, and then they just keep going on up until they get to the Saline River, and they start going west and in pursuit of them. And then when they got to where we think the battle site actually is.
And it was a running battle. A running fight isn't that you're on a dead run all the time. It's just that you don't have the battle scenario as you did in the Civil War, where there's a line on the north and a line on the south, and you stand there and shoot at each other and go through. Because the military had to adapt kind of the Native American warfare in the plains as strike and get back. The battle site was in controversy, as they all are. You have to find the right artifacts and stuff, and it's hard to sort out some of them from historic settlers versus what was military and what was Native American, because the Native Americans were trading.
And so I always wondered, and sometimes I would drive down those country roads near, in between, and I would always think, I wonder where it really is. And then one day I got that call from Michael Cox, and he said, Angela, I got something I think you may be interested in. And he called me and he says, I think we found the battle site of Saline River, Battle of Saline. I said, you did? He said, well, we're trying to verify. We've come upon all of this stuff.
So yeah, these gentlemen out here today are giving us a review of a battle that was fought here between the military out of Fort Hays, the U.S. Army, and the Cheyennes. Were they all Cheyenne or were they mixed?
There was probably some Arapaho in the mix.
Okay.
To tell the story, on August 1st, 1867, the Cheyenne attacked and killed 7 railroad workers over at Victoria. And then the fort sent out the troop of Buffalo soldiers.
He left with 44 in the beginning.
Commanded by Armis. And he writes that they were marching upstream, and that would have been along through there, when they encountered 70 to 80 natives up on a hill, and this would have been up here where the natives would have been. But as they came through there's a depression for sure, and that just on this side of those trees is where the skirmish line is found. And you can tell that they started attacking up, and the natives started attacking down. I guess they fought their way up the hill once at least.
He continued to advance from this. You can barely see the fence line over there.
Yes.
Through the trees.
That's first contact. This was the brutal part of the battle. That's hallowed ground down there. When Christie was killed down there, 6 natives were killed in this part of the battle.
So you determined the battle started down here. And is that from the diaries or the artifacts you found?
Artifacts. I didn't think that was it. I thought I was looking for Custer's campground on the Saline River, because I found a lot of like old tin cans back in that first corner, and then other pieces. But I was still digging up shell casings, live rounds. I found the gun barrel, found the binocular eyepiece, just a lot of debris, military period debris.
Yeah.
So but it wasn't until I found the fire line in the ravine, I realized it was a battle site. The next day, I called Angela, and I told Angela Bates from Nicodemus Historic Society.
So he called me up and he said, come on over. And I went over and we drove around, and Mike had put some flags down. And I thought, okay, I could see. Then if you read the officer's report and what he was saying and where they were located and what was happening, you could almost picture what was literally happening. And so I called my friend Leo Oliver, and I said, Leo, you need to come over here and see this. I think this is probably the battle site of the Battle of Saline.
She brought Oliver out. He confirmed what I had found.
The evidence is really convincing. And so then I called the State Historical Society. I said, you guys need to come out.
And you were talking about the artifacts. Sergeant Christie did fall. He would have had a saber, we suspect, and the saber guard was found. Michael pointed out to him where that was found.
That's just down here at the bottom of the knoll.
Just right down in through here. So that probably was held by Sergeant Christie.
It's a non-commissioned officer saber handguard. And so that's why if I had to put a position on where Christie was killed, it's right down here. But he came out here, started at Leavenworth with the rest of them, Fort Leavenworth, and unfortunately met his demise out here.
Yeah.
So Armis got shot by a mini ball, and we found mini balls out here.
Yeah.
He got shot in the hip, he said, but he recovered quickly. 3 weeks later, he was on a horse fighting again.
Ouch.
You know. Yeah. He was quite a young lad. So, but the Buffalo soldiers made him look good. You know, they had something to prove.
They were doing it to build a home for themselves. You know, they were trying to build a home for themselves. So they was trying to make sure what they did was good. They gave their families a place to go. So all those battles were about, I need to do this. I have to do this for my family. Where are they going to live if I don't? You know, so I think where all those battles, I think that's what's in the back of their mind. If we don't do this, who's going to? Who's going to help us?
And when I got that call from Mike, he said, Angela, you just got to come over and see. And I was like, okay. So that was exciting. I mean, it just really, really was to know that this is, I mean, why all of the shells and the arrowheads, a battle took place there. And it just makes sense that it was the Battle of Saline.
And it was their first battle site. This would have been their first one.
That's
too.
one part. It's their first battle, their first fatality in Moon Christie. And it set them on their course to be one of the most respected military units up through World War II.
Yeah.
You know, they fought, they went to the Spanish-American War, World War I, World War II. This was their beginning.
Everybody says, what did they do at the battle? Well, what did they do before and after? You know, the battle itself is great, but where did that take them? You know, so I have a little different respect, so I don't really focus on the battles they were in. I focus on what they did from the battles, what came after the battles. Where did it propel you? You know, where did it propel black people? Where did it propel white people? You know, everybody thinks when you do something, it just affects your race or your color, when it affects everybody.
I think the legacy of the Buffalo Soldiers in Northwest Kansas, you're talking right, you know, after the Civil War, you know, during Reconstruction, this is what's going on out here. These battles took place predating the actual real migration and settlement of people. So their involvement in that is paramount to the story itself of expanding this country, expanding the state of Kansas and the settlement, reaching all the way over to the Colorado border and beyond.
And then I tell people, because most people think of, oh, they hear the Civil War and then they hear the Civil Rights Movement. There's about 100 years difference between those two. You know, what happened in between that time? That was when blacks really made a big stride, because that was at that moment when everything really changed, where they could read and write, where they could own land, where they, you know, where they actually made a life for themselves. That was when that dream started, where they could make a way of life for themselves. You know, so during that time frame was where I think a lot of that expansion, a lot of that growth and knowledge came from.
I do it because everyone knows how bad black people have had it and had it in the past. Some still have it that way. But I do it because I want to teach people how to overcome. No matter what card you were dealt, it matters about what you do with the card you were dealt.
It's especially ours with the Buffalo Soldier, but just, let's say, just American history in general. It's really easy for people to forget. And it's really easy for people not to appreciate how much work it took to get to the point that we're at. You know, you just look around and see that where we're at, you see the end product, but you don't understand, have any real concept of how we got here. You know, what it was like before we got here, what we had to go through, both our ancestors, the advancements in both the military and just technology, society, and all that went into making us what we are today. The interplay between the different people, different races, different backgrounds, different ideologies, and how all of that has shaped our personal histories and that we're still dealing with today. You just don't really appreciate it if you don't actually bother to learn about any of it.